Well, we're just over a week to Election Day, and before you head to the polls, Western Mass News is taking a deep dive into the 5 questions you'll see on your ballot if you're voting in Massachusetts.
And today we're looking at question number 1. Should the state auditor have the power to audit the legislature?
Our current state auditor campaigned across the state, gathering the signatures needed to get the proposition on the ballot. But a handful of political experts are sounding alarm, saying question 1 is actually a question of constitutionality.
Our state legislature is the least transparent state legislature in the entire nation.
That's the main message State Auditor Diana DiZoglio wants the Commonwealth to remember when walking into the voting booth on November 5th. DiZoglio says she has no ability to monitor how taxpayer money is being spent by the legislature.
Right now, legislative leaders are refusing to comply with a basic audit by the Office of State Auditor that every other state entity complies with.
At face value, DiZoglio's petition for yes on question 1 sounds like a no-brainer. The state auditor should be able to do a basic audit.
We have a handful of really powerful politicians in our state legislature who are actually denying the taxpayers of Massachusetts access to those receipts, to that documentation.
But political science professor and author Gerald Duquette wants the Commonwealth to know they may be voting yes to disrupting the entire political structure of Massachusetts. A quick Google search will show you it's hard to find opposition to question 1, a reason why Duquette believes it's undoubtedly going to pass, in part because there are few with the expertise needed to understand the full scope of the issue.
The separation of powers and legislative supremacy principles of the Massachusetts Constitution make it very clear that an executive officer can never have oversight over the legislature.
When you read the job description of the state auditor straight from the Massachusetts Constitution, it outlines every audit that can be done. The state legislature, though, is an exception. Duquette says it's intentional and for a good reason.
Every previous auditor who asked for the legal opinion on this issue got the same opinion and wisely chose not to pursue this because it's not constitutional.
Duquette says he and his colleagues have concerns, believing that giving the state auditor this kind of oversight over the legislature will open the floodgates, muddying the clearly defined system of checks and balances.
All she wants to do is make it legal to audit the legislature. Right? That doesn't make any sense. She's a constitutional officer. A constitutional officer, duly elected, is probably the last person that should be playing fast and loose with the Constitution.
It's something cautioned by DiZoglio's predecessor, former state auditor Suzanne Bump, who even testified on the matter back in March. Addressing Beacon Hill, Bump reminded all state auditors must follow the same playbook refereed by the federal government. Bump testified question 1 would put Massachusetts entirely out of bounds.
The proper subjects of government audits are government programs that have been authorized by the legislature to serve public purposes. They do not include the internal workings of the legislative branch of government.
Ultimately, it boils down to accountability and transparency, and whose job it should be to enforce it.
117 other audits have been conducted by our Office of the State Legislature throughout history, and we're simply seeking to return that past practice.